All right, welcome to Halitics. I'm Hal Ginsberg. So glad to be talking today. It is Wednesday. It's hump day. I always sort of am in a good mood. I've been saying that on Wednesdays, and also just want to make sure I get this up on Halitics as well. So there we go. Just started the stream just a second later than the music, which meant that the music ended before I had a chance to post on Halitics. But yeah, obviously the video, the whole video, will be available for you on YouTube. And I actually did upload a recorded version of yesterday's program sometime in the afternoon. So if you missed it right after it was broadcast, you can definitely check out yesterday's program with Arlen, which I thought was a real good one. A lot of good back and forth conversation. Love talking to Arlen. And also I just was testing the ringer. I don't know if you hear that or not. I have a little setup here where you're not supposed to hear what's too soft. You have to be above a certain threshold, but I'm not sure that when I'm talking in that ringer that the test ringer, if you hear it. So I could go back and listen at some point. I will. I haven't heard it, but I would assume that you can, because once the threshold is reached through my voice, you should hear even very soft noises in the background. If I wasn't talking, you wouldn't hear it. All right, so today's program, and yeah, I said usually I'm in a good mood, or at least a better mood. I haven't been feeling very good lately. It's been a kind of a depressing time for me, very much so. Obviously, politically, things are really bad. And what I find most distressing, I think, is my inability to find people to work with to try to build a little bit better future for everybody. And, I was down on the Hill yesterday, and I got to admit, I didn't handle the situation well at all. Today's program, we're calling it Worse Than Useless. At least that's the thumbnail. And that's, Bernie and Jayapal and kind of the progressives in quotation mark. Are they really doing any of us a favor at all by their efforts? And I'm going to have to say, yeah. And I mean, this is kind of beating a horse. I hate to use that expression. It's animal abuse, but this is continuing a refrain that has been quite frequently played on Halitics. But, I just was at this rally, and I'll play some clips from it in a little bit after we talk about Palestine, Gaza, Israel. But, I just to put that bow on this, is it a happy Wednesday for you, Hal? Well, I'm down on the Hill and I'm seeing folks, and we'll play the video, but I think this is hurting our movement. Do I like Medicare for all? Heck, I love it. We need it. This is one of the most important policies that government can possibly provide, guaranteeing everyone health care. That should be one of the core functions, an essential aspect of a civilized society. And in so many ways, it would help our country, help our economy, help virtually everyone, with the exception of a tiny layer, probably well under 1% at the very top, and yet they're driving the bus. So do I like Medicare for all? I love it. I've been talking about this for I don't know how long. But what Bernie and Jayapal are doing, I think, is making it less. And I know, how could that be, right? Doesn't that seem so counterintuitive? You have a rally, you have all these nurses, you have all these folks in T-shirts. People are applauding. How could that effort, that energy, how could that hurt the movement? How could that set us back? I hope to talk about this with Chuck Pinocchio, too, by the way, our great healthcare friend of Halitics, who disagrees with me, but I just could not talk about this today. I don't know how much he disagrees with me. I think he would, I don't know. I can't speak for him, so I don't know. But I believe on balance, he disagrees with me. I do some other organizers for whom I have great respect. I just don't see this as moving our cause forward in any way. I think it's a setback. I think the idea that we're going to put energy, time, and excitement, put what little juice we still feel we might have behind a movement that is being led by Democrats who are not ultimately committed to it, who are not going to go to the mat for it, who are going to let it slide, who are going to let it die. We're going to be disappointed yet again. And this is time wasted. This is energy and money lost when we could be channeling it, funneling into something that might, I'm not saying will win, that might win. So worse than useless? Well, what do you think? 240-242-5646. Would love to talk to you about this. 240-242-5646. And let me see if I've got this on the YouTubes. I should. Yeah, it's there. I don't know why. Sometimes it doesn't pop up right away when I click it. Oh, by the way, got a new, I had that big boost, right? When I did the debate, wasn't the debate. The debate video I saw, America Lost the Debate, actually did pretty well for my videos. But the most recent one, which was, what was it? Oh, impeachment. Yeah, that did really well. See, if I go very tendentious, if I go partisan, or at least people think they see the name impeach, like, oh, Hal's finally all against Trump. He's gonna be all in with Dems and against Trump. He's gonna be part of indivisible. He's been indivisible against Trump. And that's not the case. But yeah, Trump is terrible. He is kind of sui generis. He's a little different. I think they're all a little bit different, right? I mean, in some ways, George W. Bush was uniquely horrible, right? I mean, people say, well, Trump is uniquely horrible. And I think there's a fascist element. There's an aspect to Trump where he has zero respect for historical norms, which is problematic in certain ways. In some ways, you could say it's good, right? We like the historical norm in the past 30 years is free trade. Trump's upending that. Got a good point. Historical trend, at least when he was running for a president in 2016 and 2024, is we support the military, we support endless war, we're Russia bad. And Trump, again, I guess to his credit, right, rejected that. He hasn't put weapons manufacturer shills in power positions. So that's a positive. I guess we'll Marco Rubio. So there's that. But, on balance, he's just terrible, too. We need someone altogether different. But in terms of the fascism, yeah, I think Trump is kind of unique. All right, so are they worse than useless? I want to know from you, 240-242-5646. Maybe you say, hey, hell, I get it. Maybe we're wasting time, or maybe these Dems aren't going to get what we want, but they're the only game in town. That's kind of the argument I hear from people a lot, is they're the only game in town. So we don't really have any other choices. So, maybe they're not perfect, but who else do we have? And my answer is, that's why we have to build something. I mean, there are the Greens. There are alternatives. I was so, Cornel West, right? Is that name Cornel West? What do I think? I think it is, right? I had some real hopes for him, right? And he just dashed them completely with kind of a bizarre narcissism that, that kind of overcame him, I suppose, where he just felt, I don't know, I'm just deserve to be anointed and the Green candidate, and then pulling back from the Greens, even though the stated criticism, they're not strongly enough against empire and they're not strongly against white supremacy, was clearly not the case. So I mean, Jill Stein, Ajamu Baraka, Butch Ware have been right there in the forefront condemning white supremacism and empire. So I found Dr. West's critique strange and problematic. And in the end, of course, it was another opportunity lost. So how many more can we lose? There's just, things are too bad, too terrible for us to keep losing opportunities. Gaza death toll, 52,400. That's the latest from Anadolu Ajansi. You can see every day they show those pictures, the images, just more destruction wrought. And this isn't like in some remote corner of the world where it's competing warlords and we can just kind of say, well, let them kill each other. It's not really our fight. That's not this situation at all. That's our aircraft carrier, Israel, that's committing atrocity after atrocity after atrocity as part of a concerted genocide. What's by consensus considered the worst crime humans are capable of. And by the way, we're getting a call. So I'm going to take your call in just a second. I believe that is our good friend, and I can recognize the number, Ari. So Ari, I promise you I'll get to you in just a moment. But so again, we don't have time to dither and delay. We have to move forward. And the Democratic Party is as much a part, or almost as much a part of a problem of the problems as the Republicans are. I just cannot see what Bernie is doing, what Jayapal is doing, is anything but counterproductive. Let's go to Ari. Hey, Ari, how you doing today?
Yeah, good morning, Hal. Thank you. I only have a couple of little things. Enjoying your show as usual. So the Democratic Party, excuse me, which I've always been supporting in the past, except for the last couple of elections, have been one of those Greens. I think you were also, I think you mentioned also in the past. But anyway, it should be a lesson to them. I don't know if they need many reminders that they're not going to be supported by their own constituents. The Democrats, if they continue on this path, they're going to keep losing. And that's the only thing I had. The second one would be, I guess.
Well, wait, before you get to the second, and I'll give you the time, absolutely. I love hearing from you, Ari. Always intelligent, always thoughtful, and you're such a good listener. So appreciated. But I just want to respond or get a little deeper into what you said about, which is that we can't support them. And I could not agree more. But the problem I'm facing, at least the people I talk to, don't seem to understand that if you keep giving the Democrats your vote, they're never going to change. They're only going to change maybe if you say, no, I won't vote for you. I will vote for the Green. I will vote for any alternative. Or perhaps, and it gets a little complicated because there's, for example, in New York, there is a real progressive, I think, running for mayor, and he is clearly superior to Andrew Cuomo. I would vote for him. I've got to get his name up there. He has a Middle Eastern name, and I'm going to try to find it for you in a bit, Ari. But absolutely, I think on balance, right, you can't vote for these bad candidates based on the argument that the alternative is worse. All that means is you're going to just keep getting more crap piled on your head. But I'm not finding that message resonating. Are you finding that message resonating with people besides yourself?
No, and that was part of my second, part of the first and second, they overlap. The second one would be what happened to the Greens. I know some of them are out there on Instagram and social media. What happened to the Green representative, and now her name disappeared you mentioned her earlier, the professor woman.
Miss Stein, Jill Stein, Dr. Jill Stein. She's actually not a professor.
Exactly.
She is a medical doctor.
A medical, I'm sorry, yeah. And then what happened to these voices? I mean, as soon as I don't know, it's typical. It seems like every election, these people, they show up, they're powerful. Their voices are heard, especially by the young people, the progressives, the real progressives, and then they're gone. We don't hear from them. Well, where are you? You know, and they need to be part of that voice that's out there, social media not only, and to remind, and everyone should be cognizant of the fact that Democrats are not going to be supported by especially this particular percentage of people who are Democrats, but they're looking at them as progressive. I like to use that term that you use. So those were the two main things. The only other thing I was going to say was thank you for your Palestine comment. I always appreciate that. And that's
well, before you go, let me respond to that point about Palestine. And Arlen and I discussed this also. It's basically just ignored. It's just not discussed. And this is the crime of the millennium, as far as I'm concerned, right? We're in the third millennium. It's after the year 2000 or 2001, whenever you started. I don't know. I would start 2000. Mm-hmm. But regardless, we haven't seen anything, I think, that equals this in terms of just sheer evil, in my opinion.
Absolutely. Me neither. I've never seen anything like this in my life. The closest would have been the Holocaust, and of course, maybe you can count Yugoslavia. You know, there were some things going on back then under Clinton, and whoever else was in charge. but this is absolutely the worst. I mean, Ukraine is a real war. Not to say that 100,000, 200,000 people in military uniform, Ukraine is, or some people are saying it's in the hundreds of thousands when you add both the Russians and the Ukrainians. I'm sure you know about that. But that's not a genocide. And I'm not saying it's right. I'm against all of that. We're all against that. All of the candidates that go for these positions, they say, we're against war, we vote for them. And everybody, as soon as they go in, they rally behind the flag, and there we go. We're supporting genocide and worse. Thank you, Hal.
All right. Thank you so much, Ari. Always great to hear from him. What a great friend of the program he is. And, I maybe there's a little bit of Western centrism, right? Eurocentrism, that we look at Israel. I look at Israel and I'm not as familiar. And so maybe it's Eurocentrism. Darfur, that was after 2000, I believe 2003, 2005 was the worst of it. 2 million killed. So far more than what we're seeing right now so far in Gaza. And then the situation in Congo and Sudan are also horrific. I think what, for me, puts this, and, Ari mentioned the Holocaust in Europe in the 20th century, and obviously, that's an evil unto itself, and I'm not going to try to say that wasn't as bad or worse. I mean, from my perspective, that was the greatest crime in a compact period of time. And we want to talk about the transatlantic slave trade, where probably more people were killed than by the Nazis, at least more than the Nazis killed the Jews. I mean, there's a lot of horrible things. And that was the deliberate murder, the extermination of millions and millions of people. So, we can quibble, but I would put that as even beyond what Israel and the U.S. are doing. But this involves my government. My government is fully behind it, is supporting it, and that makes it, for me, on a different plane. And the fact that we're not discussing this. See, they meet, right? The Democrats meet, and we'll play the video in a little bit, and they talk about Medicare for all. And it's a really important issue. I'm not diminishing that at all. But to have this conversation in the shadow of the Capitol, when you're in a building with dozens and dozens of fellow lawmakers from your party who are voting every day or whenever the opportunity arises to support mass murder. And at the same time, it made it very clear they're not going to support you when it comes to Medicare for all. To me, that's like you've so missed the forest. You've so missed the forest for this tree. Well, I've got a few. Jared Golden once said he supports Medicare for all. Kamala said she supported Medicare for all. So we can win. And you're completely missing the whole situation, the whole zeitgeist, which is these are corrupt people. These are people that you work with, that you rub. If you're Jayapal, if you're Bernie, these are people in your house, in your whether it's the House of the Senate House or the Congress, the House of the Representatives. Regardless, these are people who will say whatever they think they need to say or they believe will help them get elected, and then they'll do whatever they view as personally in their best interest, with rare exceptions. And you're just missing that entire zeitgeist. That's the dynamic that we live in right now. All right, 35 more, according to Anadolu Ajansi, which is from the Ministry of Health there. They get those numbers. 35 more Palestinians slaughtered in Israeli airstrikes every single day. Come on and tell you about this. And as Ari said, so few people talk about it. That's another thing that's just incredibly heartbreaking for me. Does this mean we shouldn't push for Medicare for all? No, of course we should. But Medicare for all is also the lack of healthcare access, affordability, availability, the costs mean a lot of Americans die. Others go bankrupt. Thousands and thousands. It's an economic anchor as well around our nation's neck. It's a moral crisis. Of course we should talk about it. Of course we should push for it. But if you're pushing for it in an ineffective manner, and you're ignoring, you're not responding to a crime of the millennium, what are we doing here, folks? What's your plan? And this isn't just Congress. This is their progressive institutional protectors. All right. Numbers. Let's just give them to you real quick. We did the 35. So the total estimate, it's always an estimate, right? But they count the bodies, and they've come up to 52,400. In the Iliad, by the way, which is one of the bloodiest, most gory, stories ever. I mean, bodies, people are biting the dust, and they're, the spear goes through their chest, out the back of their bodies, and their eyeballs pop out of their head. I mean, it's really, really gory and horrific. It's great literature, of course, but it's horrific. And one thing that Homer does is that everyone who's killed has a name. He identifies them, and he doesn't just say, Joe. It's always, well, Joe isn't one of their names, but, they're Diphobus or someone like that. I can't even pronounce the Greek. But it's, it's Joseph from Sparta. It's, Helenus from Troy. Everyone who's killed, and often exceedingly graphic imagery, they're identified, often their father, their family history. So he really does personalize it, or I should say they, or whoever, the poet who first committed the oral poem to writing, makes you know the people that are killed. And of course, that makes it more horrible, makes the war feel worse. It's not sentimental. He doesn't use a lot of adjectives to make you pull at your heartstrings. He just describes, this is what war is. This is the reality. And you can say, oh, Achilles is a hero, or Hector is a hero, and Hector is protecting his people. But the reality is all these dead bodies, these young men lying dead on the battlefield. And it's not just men, it's also slave girls, women and girls who are stolen from their homes by the Greek army. And then, treated just chattel, right? It's the fear that your city is going to be sacked. So he gives it to you straight. And I mean, it hasn't stopped our lust for war, but at least you have art that tells you what it's like. I'm not able to do that. I just give you the numbers. But every single one of those 52,400 Gazans had a name. They were individuals. They had lives. There were people who loved them. It's so awful. I cannot, words don't express, and I'm not nearly articulate. I'm not Homer. I can't describe for you in the ways that a great poet can just how terrible this is. But can't we understand it? Can't we say, no, this has to stop? We can't vote. What Ari said is so true. If you keep voting for Democrats, you're going to keep getting really bad Democrats. And when you don't get bad Democrats, you're going to get even worse, maybe Republicans. Couldn't we agree? No, Kamala, no. But we couldn't do it. And that's why what Bernie and Pramila Jayapal and AOC are doing is so, I believe, misguided at best, or just simply wrong. Because they're continuing the process of sheepdog. No, vote for the Democrat. Vote for the Democrat. Hey, if you vote for enough Democrats, we'll get you Medicare for all. I don't think so. I don't see it. Maybe before, I don't know. Maybe Obama. but we didn't. And, there's always the excuse, well, Lieberman, well, Baucus, well, what have you. No, not even a public option, which Pelosi actually voted for. It could have been maybe done. All right, from March 18 through April 29, Trump and Netanyahu have killed over 2,300 Gazans, 35 people yesterday or up through into today, and over 1,000 children, which I, by the way, am estimating, but given what the percentage of dead children has been over the course of this crime by Israel, it's a safe bet, I believe, to say over 1,000 Israelis. So we'll get to I'm going to move on to the Medicare for All rally that I was at yesterday. Very brief period of time. And again, I'm not happy with the way I handled it. I kind of got into beef with a few people. I saw a guy that I've been estranged from. He just decided to cut me off, ghosted me, partly, political stuff, right? I mean, this is somebody who works to help elect Democrats and has been a complete indivisible type. And I don't think they like the ways that I criticize Democrats, but I also take ownership. Some of my speaking, my dialogue with them hasn't been as measured as it could be. I get critical. There's somebody who posts on Halitics. By the way, don't forget, go to Halitics. And this is an object lesson. This isn't just me, rending my hair, lamenting my bad behavior, which I do quite frequently. But it's also, hey, if you want to win, sometimes you have to figure out how to make allies, how to get, or at least not to totally alienate people. And I go back and forth on this because I think a lot of these progressive institutional organizers, they're not persuadable. They have a career, they make money, they're salaried, and it all comes from promoting Democrats, pushing for Democrats, pushing a Democratic agenda, not challenging the Democratic Party. So they may not be persuadable. But even so, I don't get anything from alienating them. I don't get anything from, challenging them in an aggressive or abrasive way. It's just that I'm angry. I'm bitter. I look at what's happening in my country, and I don't get how there isn't more outrage, more anger at both parties. All right, I'm going to play this now. So this is the event yesterday around, it was 11, I guess. I got there a little after 11. I had trouble parking. And then I had to move. My parking space was not ideal, so I couldn't stay for very long. But I did manage to videotape some of it. And it's not the best quality. Well, it looks nice and clear. It's crisp, but there's a little bit of jitter to the video. So you may just bear that in mind, or you might want to just not even use the. You might just want to, just, I don't know, look away. But the video is important, and I'll comment on it at various points. So here we go. This is the rally. And you can see there's a good crowd there, but I want to just make this point right now. Virtually everyone in this image that you're seeing now, and then I'll start. But I want to think about this. They're almost all in red. Now, there were people who weren't in red. I wasn't in red. But the majority, I would say a sizable majority, were, and we'll, I'm going to play the audio when we get to where it's more relevant. But let me play through it. So you see some various folks, but mostly red, and that's National Nurses United. So these are rank and file nurses mostly who were attending. It wasn't like a huge rally with tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people. It was, and I think that's because maybe it wasn't that well promoted, but also I think people have kind of said, this isn't working. We're not getting it. We've been doing this for a decade now. We've been promoting it. And the Democrats aren't moving this. I think that's a very reasonable position to take. So there's Bernie. You can see him in the middle. And now Bonnie Castillo, who is the chair, the executive director of National Nurses United, is going to speak. And what she has to say is very worth hearing. So again, there's Jayapal. You can see I have jitter. There's Castillo. So let's see. And she's going to be quiet, but then you'll hear her. And I like what she says. Believe me, I think it's really good. It's a right, correct message, but it's not going to change anything. So again, is this effective? Is this helping our movement, or is it setting it back because we have energy, we have money, we have excitement behind something that's doomed to fail?
It's no secret that as we're here in DC, that we are here at a very particular time.
All right, no one can hear her, and she.
It's a moment where. Can you hear me? Okay, is that better? All right. As I said, it's no secret that we're here in DC at a very particular time in our country's history.
So she's saying, if you can't hear that, we're here in DC at a very particular time in our nation's history. So she's setting, again, the Trump era as distinct from previous times. Although in previous eras, what are those previous eras? Obama, first Trump, Biden, no Medicare for all in any of those eras either. Clinton, no Medicare for all in that era either. War, lots of wars in those eras, lots of torture in those eras, security state in those eras. So again, yeah, Trump is kind of different, but the way Castillo sets it up is designed to make Trump the boogeyman, the bad guy, and we Democrats, right? Because she's a Democrat. These are Democrats, although I guess Bernie's an independent. But he was at the DNC. He spoke in favor of Kamala Harris. He endorsed her. He endorsed Hillary. He endorsed his friend Joe Biden. So he's a Democrat in all but name. And what this rally is designed to do is to sort of set the Democrats as different from Trump and the Republicans. But when it comes to passing Medicare for all, I don't think there's any difference at all. I haven't seen it. I'm not observing it. Certainly not in terms of what the party is prepared to do. All right, we got a caller. Who do we have on the line?
Hi, my name is Kristen Grimm, and I am the founder of an organization called Mothers for Medicare for All. We are no longer a nonprofit. We got closed down due to COVID, but I'm so grateful for you hosting this conversation and engaging about our need for Medicare for all and really what's going on in our country right now and what has been going on. And thank you.
Well, can I just interrupt you for a second, Kristen? I'll totally hear you out. I always give everyone a huge opportunity to speak. But I so appreciate you taking the time to call. And I don't think we've ever talked before. I'm so grateful that you found me and you took this opportunity. So thank you.
Yeah, you're most welcome. And one of the things that, just to give a real quick background about me, one of my sons had 25 surgeries, and he had most of them in his childhood and adolescent years. And the bottom line is I became a healthcare advocate by first walking the floors of children's hospitals in this nation and realizing that one of our dirty little secrets in this country is that children's hospitals every day send families to collections. And it has a lot to do with insurance and all the complicated things, but I became a Medicaid advocate. I worked in Tennessee as a healthcare advocate volunteer, and I realized that Medicaid does so many amazing things. We literally do not have children's hospitals in this country without Medicaid in the capacity that we have them. But it's Medicare for all and single payer. We need universal coverage for everyone, right? So I got into this movement because I realized, who is holding back healthcare reform in this country? And it's both sides of the aisle, right? And so what Mothers for Medicare for All did was we decided to just stand in front of the office of a member of Congress closest to my house, Representative Cooper. He was a Democrat representing a Nashville district, and he had co-signed on to Medicare for All in 2017. But it was safe to co-sign onto Medicare for All in 2017 because his party did not have the House. And then when they got it in 2019, he wouldn't sign on. So what we did was we stood in front of, and mainly it was just me, standing in front of his office every Friday from 8 to 5, asking him from the perspective of a mother's love. I stood there with a mother's love for my son and for all of us. Would you please co-sign? He never co-signed onto Medicare for All in 2019, and I stood in 2020 as well. And COVID shut us down. But what I learned is that in the process of me being an advocate for healthcare in Tennessee, and then on a national level, no one walks into a hospital as a Republican or a Democrat. We all just walk into a hospital or into a doctor's office or a walk-in clinic or an emergency room as a human being. And healthcare should be a human right. And this nation has normalized human suffering since our inception.
And not only normalize it, but is profiting from it, right? I mean, that's another area where Wall Street, private equity, and some very highly educated elite doctors can make gobs and gobs of money from fear and from actual pain. Let me ask you, Kristen, because I want to narrow you down or focus you for just a moment, a couple of things, but I also just put on the screen this, and when you were speaking about Cooper and how he only signed on to the bill when it was a non-election year and when it was there was no likelihood it would pass. I put up from Axios how the Progressive Caucus backed away from its push for Medicare for All last year because Kamala Harris was against it, right? The Democrat nominee that they all endorsed was against Medicare for All. So, I mean, what good are they? This is my question. When you were speaking, you talked about the importance of Medicaid. Let me just continue for one second, a little bit down. At least the Democrats are speaking about the importance of Medicaid, and I agree with you 100% how important that program is, insufficient though it may be. Am I wrong when I'm saying, hey, the Democrats, what these two are doing, Jayapal and Sanders and others, is actually maybe counterproductive?
No, I don't see it as counterproductive because, it's not counterproductive because consistently Senator Sanders and Representative Jayapal show up on Medicare for All consistently. They have the same message every time, and they're not going to give up. And we have to have and have had the long game mentality in the fight for universal coverage. To just give a little bit of historic context to our nation's fight for health care, in 1935, we had the Social Security Act. And Frances Perkins, she was the architect of the Social Security Act of 1935. And she felt that we didn't have true Social Security without a national health program. So in her original plan, we had universal coverage, a national health plan in that act. So who was it lobbied out by? Can you guess? Take a while.
Bernie.
No, it was the American Medical Association.
Oh, I'm sorry. I misunderstood. I thought you were saying who was in support. Yeah, no. And I was just looking you up too, Kristen Grimm. That's why I kind of lost the thread a little bit because I was like, wow, you must be somebody important. And I appreciate, and that's a terrible way to phrase it because everyone's important. But in terms of having an organization before you, that you represent, the AMA has been a really regressive force. You're absolutely right, of course.
Yeah, so they lobbied it out, and we've been, and they still, when they have a national convening, there's so many great physicians fighting for this movement within the AMA. Physicians for a National Health Program is another amazing organization, and they get closer every year, every time they have a national convening. But all of that to say, there's so many forces at play. And so I don't believe it's counterproductive. And I do want to say something about Kamala Harris. She did co-sign on to Medicare for All. She stood at the podium with Bernie. And there's so many things at play, and it's basically corporate greed. And the insurance companies got their talons into our healthcare system, and they run the show. And they run the show in Medicaid and Medicare for All. And physicians cannot do anything with a Medicaid patient, even a pediatric care. Everything has to be okayed by those MCOs, which are managed care organizations, United Health, all of them that manage Medicaid and the Medicare, so portions of, how we insure the elderly and individuals with disabilities. This is my heart issue is we have two sections of healthcare reformers in this country. We have the Medicaid advocates, and then we have the Medicare for All advocates. And my purpose is to join these two movements together to get us all on the same page. And I believe that love is a movement. I believe in loving Medicaid. I believe in loving Medicare for All. I believe that we cannot save what we do not love, and we cannot love what we do not understand. And we've just, got to get to in the progressive spaces and in the human spaces, we've got to get on the same page in the sense that we've got to understand how healthcare actually works in this country and the beauty of it.
Do you think, Kristen, let me interrupt you again, and I'm going to put your image on the screen. I think this is you. I was doing a lot of work to try to find you. Do you think the Democrats will deliver? Because, see, that's the core of my argument, is that the Democrats will not deliver Medicare for All. And that's why what Bernie and Jayapal and the others should be doing is building a movement that will deliver Medicare for All.
So the people need, this is just my humble opinion based on lived experience. The people are going to have to build that movement. We're going to have to educate, mobilize, and get people to stand in front of the offices of members of Congress that won't sign on to this legislation. Because Representative Jayapal and Dingell and then Senator Sanders can't do anything to get their colleagues to sign on to this legislation. It goes nowhere if we don't have co-signers. And so, yes, we've got to get the people to stand in front of with loving signs. The movement has to be based in love, because I believe that love is a movement. I stood in front of Jim Cooper's office with a mother's love. My sign said, basically I just referenced a mother's love, and that's why I was standing there. And it was true, but I was also standing there for everyone. And I do believe that we can get everyone on the same page, but it has to be a people-led movement. And we have to understand how to do that. And you have to go to your leaders, and you have to do it in the public spaces. You have to stand in front of their office and with love and say, please sign on to this. People are dying, people are suffering, and both sides of the aisle need to be called out to compassion and to passing laws that ensure human rights.
What's your website, by the way, Kristen?
We don't have it right now because we had to close. So this is just a name only. We're not a functioning 501c3 anymore because of COVID. But I can't even find you how I found you on Facebook. So we're going to have to connect because I don't want to lose you. I don't even.
Yeah, you know what? I want us to connect because I also, A, super appreciate your finding me and calling in, and B, I get into it with people, and that's my issue sometimes, but I like the back and forth. I don't think it's as good if we agree on anything or on everything. So I'm really, I guess, heartened by your belief, somebody who's in this space far more than I am, the healthcare for all space, that you're somewhat optimistic that the Democratic party, the elites in that party can be moved. I'm less so. And I think that's something we need to continue to explore.
Yeah, I know. So here's the thing. People can change. How do I know? I have changed. I used to have a very different political viewpoint than I have today. People can change, and change is our only hope. And polarization is not a movement. Okay? And being open to going to people with love, even protesting with love. Wherever we go, I invite people to do it with love. And to share our personal stories, but in the public spaces, because you can walk in the office. Jim Cooper wanted me to walk in his office, and he wanted me to go talk to him in his office. And I was like, but he only wanted to have me do that on a Friday. And I said, I'll talk to you any other time, but on Fridays I'm standing in front of your office. And, you know, Jim is not an evil man. He's not a bad man. He was just owned by something, you know, the corporate greed, the insurance companies. And the bottom line is that, yes, I believe that people can change, and it's proven throughout our history. But I believe that there are components in this movement that need to be joined together. I've seen them in the back rooms of it all, and I know that we can come together. The Medicaid advocates and the Medicare for All advocates can come together and be a powerful force in this space and play the long game.
Let me push back just a tiny little bit on what you said, because I agree with almost all of it. I do think that we have to take a lot of the partisanship out of this. And when we talk about pressuring Congress, I think the way to do that is by individuals and groups like yourself reaching across to folks who may have otherwise different political views, maybe in a different party. I think a bipartisan or multi-partisan movement is essential. My fear, my concern is that Congress itself, as you described, Cooper, their set of considerations is often very different than what's best for their constituents.
Right. That's right. Because if they have a very different mindset. I just know that when they feel pressure, they change. They feel pressure, or they feel moved, right? And so we have a lot of protesting going on, and I think that our members of Congress need to be moved by personal stories, us showing up in the spaces, and getting people to see that no one walks into a hospital as a Republican or a Democrat, and we are all connected. And another component of it is in the advocacy spaces is that the billionaire class, guess what they cannot buy? They can't buy a cure for cancer. You see, we impede medical discovery at every turn. I know this. My son's condition. Yeah, I've lived this. We're all connected. And how are we impeding medical discovery? By having some people in, some people out, people being underinsured. And so we've got to change the narrative. And I look at everyone that I lobby to or for and with, and I say, you know what? To the Republicans that I've lobbied with, you may need what I'm fighting for one day. You see, because we humans are all connected.
Well, I love your message, and I agree with it 100%. I so appreciate your calling, Kristen. I'm going to move on, if that's all right. Let's try to connect off air. I'm very easy to find. Probably best way is through the Halitics, or just message me on Facebook. Since you found me on Facebook, that should be easy enough.
Yeah, I'll message you on Halitics, and it's not a lost cause. It's just the beginning. And
I don't, you know what? I smiled when you said that because people think that I'm so pessimistic about the Democrats that I view it as a lost cause. I don't. I just think that may not be the vehicle that will deliver us to the promised land, if that's a fair way to characterize it.
I hear that. All right. Thank you so much, Hal. And your name's Hal, right?
It is Hal. That's right. Last I checked, it's actually Harold. My mom calls me Harold. My friends said you should change your name when I was in high school. They're like, call yourself Hal. It's a little less uncool. They wouldn't have said cool. Like, they weren't going to say you're cool if you're Hal. Yeah. But it's a little tiny bit less uncool than Harold. So, yeah. Well, you call me whatever you want.
Yeah, you're fine. Well, Hal, it's such an honor to speak with you today.
Oh my gosh! Oh wow, that's way over the top. But thanks, Kristen. We'll talk. Yeah. We'll connect soon, and we'll get you back on real quick.
Yeah. Thanks, dear. Bye.
All right. Awesome. That's Kristen Grimm. What an honor to have her on, and to say such nice things about me. That puts a smile on my face after I was having a rough. Well, I have definitely lost connections. I've lost people that have been in my life because I have been rather, what's the word I'm looking for? Uncompromising. And I'm not always listening when people tell me, hey, what about this? What about that? And I'm like, come on, we've been through this. We've been through it. How many times do we have to beat our heads against a wall before we move on from this corrupt party? But when someone like Kristen Grimm, who's been organizing and it's out of love, tells me, hey, no, there's reason for hope. I'm all in with that. We have been on now for close to that full hour. I was playing the Bonnie Castillo clip. I do want to continue to share that with you. Just a few more moments maybe, but the point she's making is that exactly the same as Kristen Grimm, which is we need this. This is a critical aspect of a civilized society. Again, my sense, my feeling at this point, my vibe is the people who need to hear it are not the nurses that are in her audience. The people who need to hear this are Congress. But Congress, man, again, they're not about doing what's best for their constituents. They're about placating and pleasing and making happy their party bosses and their donors, because that's how they'll, in the end, get their little pot of gold. The pot of gold at the end of the rainbow isn't $170,000 annual salary from Congress. That pot of gold is the $500,000 speeches to Goldman Sachs. That pot of gold is the $1 million a year lobbyist job. That pot of gold is, getting a position on the boards of Wall Street corporations, Wall Street banks. And that's, I think, what they're looking for. I'm sorry to say. Here's Bonnie Castillo.
Endless cuts and attacks on public services, Medicaid, Medicare, Social Security, and they've even tried to strip away the protected union rights of federal workers, including 15,000 of our VA nurses. They hope that we'll get stuck fighting just to save protections we've already won and be too demoralized to move forward. Well, guess what? You're looking at it. Registered nurses and our allies don't step back. We step up.
All right, I'm going to stop it there because, I love the nurses. I've worked with a lot of the nurses, and I've worked on some of these campaigns, and I love the people who are doing them, and I know they want what's best, and I know they believe that this strategy is most likely to succeed. I just don't think they're right on that. I think if your goal or your plan is to get Medicare for all, you need to build a movement politically that is free of corporate fetters, corporate control. And that isn't a movement that includes Pramila Jayapal and Bernie Sanders and the Democratic Party. They're not prepared to take on the billionaire class that ultimately controls them, that pulls their strings. I think it's possible, but I don't think it's possible right now. I'm not seeing the likelihood that the Democratic Party is going to change. If anything, it's consistently been changing over the course of my lifetime, with maybe a few fits and starts. It's gotten worse and worse and worse. All right, the economy not performing well under Trump, contracts at 0.3% rate in first quarter. Listen, I'm not about the size. I'm about the distribution. Trump is probably going to make, if he hasn't already, I mean, certainly any tax cuts for the wealthy are going to lead to even more inequality. But I'm not really concerned about what Republicans say. What I'm concerned about is what we on the left say. And we make a terrible mistake if we start condemning Trump or condemning the economy, his economy, because it's shrinking. Our focus should be on distribution. We need a smaller economy. We are burning our mother up. A growing economy means more fossil fuel emissions. It means more environmental degradation. It means accelerating ecocide. We need to make do with less, but less that is fairly and equitably distributed. By the way, that's redundant, right? Because I think fair and equitable are the same, mean exactly the same thing. We need, maybe not exactly, because equitable would also, I think, imply a certain degree of equality. Like some people might say, well, it's fair. I worked really hard and you didn't do anything, so I get to keep everything and you get nothing. Some would say, well, that's fair. No one would probably call that equitable. So yes, there should be fairness and there should also be equity. And we have neither. The people who work the hardest are far from the most highly rewarded, and wealth and income is distributed incredibly inequitably in our society. So that's what we should be focusing on. And yeah, I think ultimately a smaller economy, a leaner economy, but one that makes sure that we all have enough and no one has too much. I just can't get all worked up about a smaller economy. It's not going to bother me. Also, just a couple of other little disappointments. So folks may know I've been talking about Kshama Sawant somewhat. She's kind of a hero for the Do Dissidents bros. They talk about her. Brianna Joy Grace had her on. I like a lot of what Kshama Sawant has to say. But, I think she just really, really, really misses the boat here with her war on tariffs. And, if you said, well, I support tariffs as part of a intelligent, well thought out trade strategy, but Trump's not pursuing that, I'd be like, okay, I get it. Yeah, he's not. But that's not what her, at least, headline is here. And if you watch the video, and I've watched parts of it, I didn't watch all. It's quite long and lengthy, and it's hard to get at the specific critique she has. But Sawant has the headline, tariffs are not good for the working class. And you can't really see this, but let me see if I can blow it up for you. She goes on to, not only is it they're not good for the working class, but she makes the point, you can see it, I'm going to really blow this up for you on the top left, that nor is capitalism itself. And I get that, right? I mean, at least the way capitalism in recent years, and even pretty much throughout its history, has led to the distribution of wealth incredibly unequally and inequitably and unfairly. Yeah, that's been bad for the working class. But there have been periods of time and places where capitalism actually led to real material benefits for the working class. And I think of the 40s, the 50s, the 60s. The working class in this country was doing pretty darn well. I think a lot of workers would have said we're doing pretty well. Maybe they should have been doing even better, but I would argue, no, I think at that period of time, workers had enough. Most did. If you had a decent manufacturing job, you had there are other factors that play. Was the work rewarding? Did it fulfill you? You know, we could look into a whole mishmash of how society should work and how jobs, what they should provide for people in terms of their quality of life, in terms of beyond just the living standard. And I would say certainly many of those jobs didn't deliver a particularly exciting quality of life, but they did just deliver a good enough living standard where where people had enough. They had health care. They had affordable education. They had a home. They had some leisure time. We don't have that anymore. We don't have a working class that has that anymore. So capitalism, when it's highly regulated, when workers are protected by unions, and when, yes, you have a intelligent trade policy that makes effective use of tariffs, you can have capitalism work pretty well, or certainly better for working people than most other, forms of government. Look, what is even capitalism? Feudalism, where you have a lord who has, knights who swear fealty to him. That's not capitalism. That didn't work so well for the working classes either. We have a remarkably complex, mutually dependent, interdependent world economy with extraordinarily long supply chains and constant pressure to consume. That's all very, very problematic. But if you try to get rid of the profit motive, if you get rid of the entire basis of capitalism completely, which is that investors can pool assets and purchase businesses or start businesses, you're going to run into you're going to open an enormous can of worms and cause great hardship. The solution is not to just say we're going to get rid of capitalism, we're going to get rid of profit motive companies. The solution is to say, no, we need much higher taxes on the rich, on elites. We need a very, very tight safety net where everyone is guaranteed enough. And for those who say, well, you can't have that in capitalism, I disagree. We have seen societies, they're not perfect. Western Europe, these are mixed economies. There is absolutely a profit motive. There are privately owned corporations that engage in Germany and Sweden and Norway for profit. But they also have managed to have very tight safety nets. They have healthcare for all. Those societies work better for working people. So I think Sawant is tragically mistaken there, where she says no tariffs. And it really calls into my mind the whether I want to continue to support that organization, because it's such an important aspect of smart policy for workers. But again, on the left, we need to distinguish between a growing economy and an economy that works for everybody. You can have a contracting economy that's juster, that is more efficient and more helpful to all, except for the top. And even for them, it in some ways, it's better. Even if it's contracting, if while it's contracting, you're redistributing the wealth and the income much more aggressively than the economy's contract. It can be done. And that's what we should be talking about, rather than lamenting a stock market that's, dropping. I know Trump doesn't want the stock market to drop. I know his supporters in general, at least the billionaires in his group, in his cohort, don't want it to drop. But we on the left, we don't have to use that argument. We can use a much better argument, which is We need to consume less. We're destroying our planet. Unchecked, rampant, crony, corrupt capitalism is the problem. And there are many tools that we need to wield in our toolkit to make it better. And one of those is tariffs, and another is certainly Medicare for all. We can do it. All right, that's gonna wrap it up. Thanks, Kristen, for calling. Thanks, Ari, of course, for calling. And I will be back tomorrow with more on Halitics.